The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. True nervous, I had been and am nervous, but I am not mad. The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed them. Above all was the sense of hearing. I heard all kind of noises that surrounded me. Why would you think I'm mad? Observe how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how the idea entered my brain. I loved the old man. He had never offended or insulted me. I did not want his money. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was the eye. He had a bird-like eye, pale blue, with a veil over it. Whenever he looked at me, my blood cooled, and so I made up my mind to kill the man and free myself of the eye forever. You must think that I am mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen how wisely and carefully I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night I turned the lock of his door and opened it, very cautiously. And then when I had made an opening big enough for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed and no light shone out, and then I stuck it in my head. I moved it slowly so that the old man would not wake up. And then when my head was well in the room, I turned on the lantern just so much that a single thin ray of light fell upon the eye. I did this for 7 nights, but I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to kill him. It was not the old man who was a problem for me, but his evil eye. On the 8th night, I was more than careful in opening the door. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my finger touched a piece of metal and made a noise. The old man sat up in the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept still and said nothing for an hour. During that time, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening as I have done night after night. Then I heard a noise, and I knew it was the sound of fear. Late at night, I had made that sound. I knew it well. I knew that the old man felt sorry for him, although I laughed to myself. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first noise. When he turned in the bed, his fears had been growing as every moment passed. When I had waited a long time without hearing him lie down, I decided to open a very little crack in the lantern. I opened it. Finally, a single ray of light was upon his eye. It was open, and I grew angry as I looked at it. I chilled my bones. My ears heard a low, dull, quick sound. It was the beating of the old man's heart. I got angrier. I kept still and hardly breathed. The beating of the heart increased. It grew quicker and louder. The old man's terror must have been extreme. The beating grew louder at each moment. And now, at the dead hour of the night, in the horrible silence of that old house, I was terrified. I waited still for some minutes, but the beating grew louder and louder. I thought the heart would burst. And now a new fear haunted me. The sound was so strong a neighbor would hear it. The old man's hour had come. With a loud shout, I threw open the lantern and burst into the room. He cried once, and once only. Immediately I forced him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. Then I smiled when I finished. But for many minutes the heart beat on a quiet sound. This, however, did not worry me. It would not be heard through the wall. After a while it stopped. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the body. I placed my hand over his heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no movement. He was stone dead. His eye wouldn't be an issue for me anymore. If you still think I am mad, you will not think it anymore when I describe the steps I took for hitting the body. I worked quickly but in silence. First of all, I took apart the body. Then I took up 3 pieces of wood from the floor and placed his body parts under the room. I then replaced the wooden floor so that no human eye, not even his, could have seen anything was wrong. There was nothing to wash out. There were no marks or blood. I had been too smart for that. The water of the tub had washed all the blood. Ha ha ha! When I had finished the crime, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. Right at the time as the clock struck, there came a noise at the street door. I went down to open it with no worries. I didn't have to fear anything. 3 men came in, saying that they were policemen. They told me a neighbor heard a loud cry during the night and suspected that a crime had happened. I smiled. I didn't have to fear anything, did I? I told them that I had shouted during the night because of a nightmare. I told them that the old man was not in the country. I showed the policeman the house and I told them to search. Search well. After a while, I took them to his room. I brought chairs there and told them to rest. I placed my own seat right on top where the body was hidden. The officers were happy and I was very relaxed. They sat and while I answered happily, they chatted. But after a while, I began to feel sick and wished they were gone. My head hurt and I had a ringing in my ears, but they still did not leave. The ringing became more annoying and harder. I talked more freely to do away the feeling, but it continued until I found that the noise was not within my ears. I talked more and with a higher voice, but the sound increased and there was nothing I could do. It was a low, dull, quick sound. I had trouble breathing, but the officers did not hear it. I stood up and talked about silly things in a high voice and with a violent hand movements. But the noise kept increasing. Was it possible that they did not hear it? No, they heard it. They knew. They were making fun of my nightmare. But anything was better than this. I could not stand those smiles any longer. I felt that I should scream or die. Stop pretending. I admit the crime. Open the wooden floor here. It is the beating of this horrible heart. The end.